At my father's funeral, my stepmother smiled like she owned the world. What she didn't know was that I held the one thing that could shatter hers, my father's true will. My name is Clara Whitman. I'm a legal consultant, trained to read between the lines of contracts, wills, and intentions. But nothing in law school prepared me for the day I'd be erased, not just from a family gathering, but from my own father's life story. I stood alone in the back row of the chapel, my black dress clinging to my skin like a second layer of silence. From this distance, I could barely see the casket, and even less the man lying inside it. The man who raised me, who used to call me his compass. Now, I wasn't even listed as his daughter in the printed obituary. Elaine sat in the front pew, draped in a designer coat the color of bone. Her son Derek flanked her like a bodyguard, his expression blank, maybe bored. They looked like royalty in mourning elegant. Composed, rehearsed. I wasn't supposed to be here. The invitation, if you could call it that, came via a lawyer's assistant, who sent me a short, sterile email with the words, "Service is private. Family only. Family." That word cut deeper than any of the condolences whispered to me that morning. The pew beside me remained empty. Nobody dared sit next to the daughter that didn't belong anymore. The daughter who once held her father's hand through grief, who used to bake birthday cakes in the shape of sailboats because he loved the sea. The daughter who, according to Elaine, had chosen to stay away, as if I had abandoned him, as if I had a choice. The priest spoke of Richard Whitman's legacy, his business, his generosity, his beautiful blended family. I waited for my name. A mention, a pause, but it never came. I was invisible, until they opened the casket for the final goodbye. A quiet procession began, Elaine leading, Derek behind. Then a string of polished acquaintances who had never stepped foot in our home when my mother was alive. I waited at the end of the line, heart racing, palms sweaty. I needed to see him. I needed to say goodbye. I had rehearsed the words in my head for days. But just as I approached the front, a hand gripped my arm. Elaine's brother, a man I barely knew, blocked my path. "Family only," he said coldly. "I am family," I whispered. He didn't flinch. "Not today." "Clara," I watched as the lid came down, sealing the last part of my father away. My knees buckled, but I refused to fall. They could erase me from the ceremony. They could pretend I never existed. But they couldn't take what was inside my bag, tucked in a worn envelope, marked with my father's handwriting and sealed with his initials. Was a truth Elaine had tried to bury. His will, the real one. He gave it to me during our last conversation 3 weeks before he died, when he looked thinner than ever, but still sharp. Still my dad. His hand trembled when he passed me the envelope. "If anything happens," he had said, "don't trust Elaine. Go to Goodman. He knows what to do." I didn't understand then. Not fully. Now, standing at the edge of my father's grave, my name wiped from his legacy, I understood everything. This wasn't just grief. It was war. And I had the first weapon. If you believe silence can be stronger than screams, subscribe to Silent Revenge, where every story hides a storm. There was a time when Sundays smelled like sea salt and fresh bagels. Before Elaine, before the locked doors and whispered lies. It was just me and Dad. Every week, we'd take the old green pickup down to the marina, where our little sailboat Elizabeth rocked gently on the water. It wasn't much paint chipped, the wood creaking when the tide got restless, but it was ours. He called it our ritual. I called it home. We'd pack 2 thermoses, his black coffee, my hot chocolate. I'd sit beside him on deck, legs dangling, and he'd tell stories sometimes, real, sometimes wildly made up. My favorite was how he once caught a seagull stealing his sandwich mid-bite and made it promise never to come back. He swore it still flew by every Sunday to check in. We talked about everything. School. The girl who pushed me in 4th grade. My fear of thunderstorms. How grief felt like water filling your shoes. Slow but heavy. He never rushed those talks. He listened like each word mattered. After the harbor, we'd head to Harborview Cafe, the one with the chipped blue booths and the cranky waitress who secretly loved my dad. We always ordered the same thing. Eggs. Benedict for him. blueberry pancakes for me. We'd sit by the window and watch the ships come in. He never looked at his phone, never took a single call. It's your time. He'd say, you and me. That's sacred. Mom died when I was 10. Breast cancer. She was brave. The kind of brave that never cries in front of her child. The morning she passed, Dad didn't let me go to school. He made pancakes, badly, and we ate in silence. Then he held me on the living room couch until the sun went down. I remember how steady his heartbeat was, solid, like a metronome for a world that had stopped making sense. After that, he became everything. Mother, father, best friend. He tucked me in every night with a kiss to my forehead. He framed my terrible middle school art and hung it in his office like it belonged at a gallery. He came to every parent-teacher meeting, even the ones where the teachers mostly wanted to talk about their home loans, because Dad was also Richard Whitman, the real estate guy, the man who built half of our side of the city. But to me, he was just Dad. He never dated. At least not that I saw. For years, it was just us. People whispered he should move on. Poor Richard. A man like that shouldn't be alone. He ignored it all. Until he met her. Elaine Prescott walked into our lives at a charity gala for the local hospital. I was 19, home from college for the summer, and attending as his +1. She wore red, a bold, calculated red with pearls too perfect to be real. She laughed at Dad's jokes like she had been waiting for him all her life. I remember watching her place her hand gently on his arm. Just enough pressure to linger. Just enough to claim space. She had 2 children, Derek, 21, and a college dropout with a smile too white to trust. And Sasha, 17, who barely spoke and stared at her phone like it was oxygen. Elaine called them her angels. Dad called them a new chapter. I wanted to like her. Really? For the first few weeks. I invited Sasha to a poetry slam on campus. She bailed last minute. I asked Derek about internships. He sneered and said he didn't do cubicles. Still, I smiled, because Dad looked happy. Happier than I'd seen in years. She's different. He told me one night. We were sitting on the porch, a bottle of red wine between us. Strong, graceful. Reminds me of your mother in some ways. I bit my tongue. She wasn't my mother, and no matter how many times Dad said her name, she never would be. The first thing she did after they got engaged 6 months later was freshen up the house. The family portrait in the hallway, replaced by a black and white canvas of modern abstract art. The ceramic teacups Mom collected, boxed away. Even the piano, the one Dad bought for me at 12, was quietly pushed to the attic because it clashed with the new aesthetic. I said nothing. Dad looked tired these days, stretched thin between business deals and Elaine's endless plans for remodeling, social events, and merging the family. But it was the little things that unsettled me most. The way Elaine answered Dad's phone without asking. The way Derek walked into his office like it belonged to him. The way my father's calendar, once filled with lunch with Clara and Sunday sale, now listed events I had never heard of, hosted by people I didn't know. And yet, every time I visited, Dad would pull me aside. "You're still my girl." He'd whisper, "No one replaces you." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But something in the house had shifted, like a glass that looked clean until you held it up to the light. And deep down, I felt it. A presence, a plan, and a quiet erasure that had already begun. It started with the calendar. At first, it was subtle. A Sunday here, a brunch there. Our standing father-daughter rituals slowly evaporated, replaced by family plans that never seemed to include me. One weekend, I flew in from Seattle to surprise Dad for his birthday. I even brought his favorite whiskey, the one he only drank when he was feeling nostalgic. But when I arrived at the house, my childhood home, the gate didn't open. Elaine had changed the security code. "I texted you," Dad said when I finally reached him. After 20 minutes of standing in the driveway, Elaine had the system updated. "I thought she added your number to the list." She hadn't. Inside, everything was different. The warm wooden tones of the living room were now replaced with glass and cold gray metal. The couch where I used to curl up beside Dad to watch old war documentaries was gone. In its place, a minimalist sectional that looked like it punished anyone who sat on it wrong, and on the mantel where Mom's photo used to sit, a sleek crystal sculpture, modern serenity. Elaine called it. "Where's the picture of Mom?" I asked. Elaine didn't even blink. "Oh." I packed it away. The frame was dated, that night. During dinner, I sat across from Derek while he scrolled through his phone between bites of imported salmon. Elaine talked nonstop about redecorating the pool house, launching a wellness blog, and how she had enrolled Dad in a lifestyle transformation program. "He needs to focus on longevity," she said, slicing her asparagus into surgical precision. "Less stress, less red meat, less emotional clutter." She looked at me when she said that. I forced a smile. "He's still healthy, right?" "Of course," Elaine said, tone sweet and dismissive. "But preventative care is everything." Dad was quieter than usual. He smiled at her stories, nodded when prompted, but his usual warmth, the spark that made him, felt dimmed, like someone had turned down the volume on his personality. After dinner, I asked to speak with him alone. We sat outside by the old fountain, one of the few things left untouched. "Dad, are you okay?" He looked tired, not just physically, but like he was carrying a weight he wasn't allowed to name. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just adjusting. Things change. You've lost weight. And Elaine, she's everywhere. I barely see you alone anymore." He gave a faint smile. "She just wants to take care of me. She wants to take over," I whispered. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached over and held my hand. "You're still my compass, Clara." But sometimes even compasses get put in drawers for a while. I didn't know what that meant then. Now I do. It got worse from there. When I called, I was told Dad was resting. When I visited, Elaine claimed he had last-minute plans. His assistant of over a decade was let go. No notice, no goodbye. Just replaced by one of Elaine's friends from her yoga circle, a woman who wore cashmere and knew nothing about the business. The staff I'd grown up with, the housekeeper who made my birthday cakes, the gardener who taught me how to prune roses, all gone. Replaced by strangers who barely made eye contact when I walked in. And then came the estate shift. I got a call from Dad's longtime financial advisor, Mr. Langston. "I was just informed that Mrs. Prescott Elaine has taken over as trustee for several family accounts," he said cautiously. "I assume you're aware." I wasn't. "She said you'd stepped back from the family's financial matters voluntarily." I hadn't. I emailed Dad that night, expressing concern. No reply. The next morning, I received a message from his new assistant. "Hi, Clara. Mr. Whitman received your note. He's currently focused on health recovery and will reach out when he's available. Thank you for understanding." Health recovery. I didn't even know he was sick. I called, straight to voicemail. When I texted, the responses were short, stiff. Unlike him, taking a break from technology, Elaine's helping me streamline my routine. "All's well. Don't worry." But I did worry. And when I flew home unannounced again, I found the locks changed. Not just the gate, the house, even the code to the side entrance I'd used since I was 15. This time, no one answered. Later, Elaine texted, "Clara, I admire your devotion, but you can't just show up anymore. Your father needs peace. We'll let you know when it's a good time to visit." No signature, just control. I realized then I wasn't being distanced. I was being erased. Systematically, politely, permanently. And my father, the man who used to race across town just to fix a leaky faucet in my dorm, was slipping away from me one day at a time. And all I could do was watch it happen. It happened on a Tuesday. I had taken a week off work and flown back to Boston without telling anyone. I knew if I called ahead, Elaine would manage the visit, and I couldn't afford another scheduled tea with Derek, or a brunch where Dad barely said 5 words to me while Elaine ordered for the table. This time, I went straight to the office. Mitchell Real Estate still had his name on the building, though the energy inside had changed. His longtime receptionist had been replaced by someone younger, sharper, and far less warm. "Mr. Whitman is in a board meeting," she said, barely glancing up from her screen. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm his daughter," I replied, keeping my voice steady. And no, I don't. I expected a scoff, maybe even security. But then I saw a familiar face. Sandra, Dad's former executive assistant of 15 years. She had left to spend time with her grandchildren, or so I'd been told. But when she saw me, her expression softened. Clara, she said, stepping forward quickly. Come with me. She led me through a side door and up a back stairwell, bypassing the receptionist completely. He's in his private office. I'll let him know you're here. Moments later, she cracked open the door. He was sitting in his chair, not the leather one behind his desk, but the smaller armchair by the window, the one he used for reading contracts when he was too tired to think. He looked older, paler. His shirt hung looser than it used to, and his eyes, usually sharp with focus, had dulled with fatigue. But when he saw me, they lit up. Clara, he said, smiling weakly. My girl. I knelt beside him, taking his hand. It felt cold. You look thin, I whispered. What's going on? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for a small lockbox beside his chair, pulled out a tan envelope sealed in red wax. Take this, he said. Don't open it unless something happens. Something like what? He looked away, out the window. Elaine means well, he began, voice low. But she's ambitious. That wasn't news. She's been managing things, he added. My schedule, my medication, the house. But I've started forgetting things. Not little things. Big things. Whole days feel like fog. I gripped his hand tighter. Have you seen a doctor? She says it's stress. The board believes her. He stopped, swallowing hard. Then he looked at me again. Do you remember that lake house we used to visit in Vermont? Of course. Mom's favorite. I tried to book it last month. Turns out we sold it 2 years ago. What? No, we didn't. I didn't. But someone did. With my power of attorney. I froze. Elaine. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he pushed the envelope into my hands. I've updated some documents, he said softly. They're with Goodman. You remember him. Our family lawyer. Before Elaine made you switch. His lips twitched into something like a smirk. I kept him on, quietly. I stared at the wax seal. What is this? Dad. A safeguard, he whispered. In case I'm not the one speaking for myself anymore. Dad, you're smart. Clara, like your mother, you see through people. A knock at the door interrupted us. Then came her voice. Richard, are you still in here? Your tea's getting cold. I stuffed the envelope into my coat pocket. Dad straightened up, suddenly alert, like a boy caught skipping class. I'm fine, he called. Just wrapping up. Elaine entered the room, all pearls and poise. She stopped when she saw me. Clara, I didn't know you were coming. Surprise, I said, forcing a smile. She turned to Dad. We have the Hendersons arriving at 6. You need to rest before then. He nodded, the light in his eyes already fading. I stood. I'll see myself out. Let's have lunch next time, Elaine said, almost sweetly. Sure, I lied. As I walked down the hall, I felt the weight of the envelope like it was burning a hole through my coat. I didn't know what Elaine was doing yet, but Dad did, and he had given me something she couldn't manipulate, couldn't erase, couldn't touch. His voice, his plan, his trust. The call came at 4. Sosetta. Not from a doctor, not from a nurse, not from the hospital. It was a text 3 words, without punctuation from Derek. Dad passed away. I stared at it for a long time before the words registered. No greeting, no time of death, no I'm sorry, just a status update. The world should have stopped, or at least slowed, but it didn't. It kept going, cars moving outside my apartment window, distant sirens echoing across the city, the hum of the refrigerator, all unchanged, unbothered. But inside me, something fractured. I called back immediately. No answer. I texted, again and again. Nothing? By 8 a. Bim! I had already packed, changed my flight, and was on the way to the airport. I kept thinking, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe I'll get there and he'll still be alive. Maybe this isn't the end. But when I landed in Boston, it was already over. They had already moved his body, already cleaned out his hospital room. And when I arrived at the house, my childhood home, I wasn't allowed inside. The gate didn't open. This time, I didn't call. I didn't plead. I just stood there, staring at the place where my entire life had happened, now guarded by stone lions and silence. An hour later, Elaine sent a message, not a call, not even a voicemail. A message. Clara, I know you're hurting. Please understand that this is a difficult time for all of us. We've decided to hold a private ceremony, close family only. I hope you find your own way to honor your father's memory. Close family. I was his only biological child, his daughter, his compass. And yet, somehow, I no longer qualified. The funeral was scheduled 3 days later at Rosewood Memorial, a venue so upscale and sterile, it looked like a boutique hotel. Not the small chapel near the harbor where Mom had been laid to rest. Not where Dad once told me he wanted to be buried. Next to her, I showed up anyway, dressed in black. Not for tradition, but defiance. No one welcomed me. The ushers guided guests to their seats with warmth, only to freeze when they saw me. One hesitated, checked a paper in his hand, and then motioned awkwardly toward the back row. The last row, that's where I sat, surrounded by strangers in tailored suits and designer sunglasses. Elaine sat front and center, a porcelain widow in a custom suit, dabbing her eyes like a woman who had just lost her soulmate. Derek beside her, bored, scrolling through his phone. There was no photo of Mom, no mention of her, no acknowledgement of the man's life before Elaine. The eulogy was brief and curated more a resume than a remembrance. They spoke of Richard Whitman, the mogul, the visionary, the loving husband to Elaine and father to her children. Not mine. They never said my name. Not once. When it came time to approach the casket, guests lined up row by row. I stayed seated until the very end, waiting for my turn. But before I could rise, Elaine's brother, that same smug man from the wake, stepped in front of me. "I'm sorry," he said, with a voice like closing doors. "Immediate family only." I stared at him. "I'm his daughter." His face didn't move. "Not according to the guest list." By the time I reached the aisle, the casket was already being closed. I saw only a sliver of him, the edge of his sleeve, the pale line of his jaw before the lid sealed shut. That was my goodbye. A glimpse, a breath, a moment that would have to last a lifetime. At the reception, I stood alone beside the floral display while Elaine played hostess. She accepted condolences with delicate smiles, spoke of Dad's final days like she had walked beside him through every breath, every heartbeat. I tried to leave quietly, but just as I turned to go, I caught a glimpse of her in conversation with a man in a tailored navy suit. He handed her a folder, thick, crisp, embossed with gold lettering. She smiled. "Tuesday," she said. "We'll finalize everything Tuesday." Robert was very clear about his wishes. That's when I knew she had it all. Or at least, she thought she did. She believed she'd won. That my father's silence meant surrender. That the last word belonged to her. She didn't know about the envelope. Didn't know what he had whispered in that dimly lit office. Didn't know what he'd hidden in my coat pocket like a final act of defiance. Because while she was rewriting history in front of 200 guests, I was carrying the truth. And truth has a way of rising, especially when buried beneath 1,000 lies. 3 days after the funeral, I found myself standing outside a narrow brick building tucked between a florist and a bookstore in Cambridge. There was no grand nameplate, no glass-fronted lobby, just a tarnished brass plaque that read, "Goodman and Hayes, attorneys at law." I hadn't been here since I was 16. When Dad brought me along to update his living trust and made me promise never to sign anything without reading the fine print. Back then, I thought he was just being cautious. Now I knew better. The receptionist was a kind woman in her 50s, with reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose and a voice like chamomile tea. "Do you have an appointment?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope still sealed, still heavy in a way that felt more symbolic than literal. "My father told me to give this to Mr. Goodman directly," I said. "He passed away last week." His name was Richard Whitman. Her expression shifted. She didn't ask for ID. Didn't even check a schedule. She stood and disappeared behind a frosted door without a word. Moments later, it opened again, and there he was. Jonathan Goodman, a man built like an overcoat, thick, reliable, slightly worn with a trimmed beard and eyes that immediately softened when they saw me. "Clara," he said, like he'd been waiting to say it. "I was wondering when you'd come." We sat in a wood-paneled office that smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and old books. The moment I handed him the envelope, he opened a locked drawer and removed a matching one. Same wax seal, same initials, same date. "Your father gave me a copy," he said, tapping the edge of my envelope. "But he insisted you hold the original. Told me it was the only way he could sleep at night." I swallowed hard. "So it's real?" He nodded. "It's more than real. It's binding." He broke the seal and carefully unfolded the document, scanning it silently. Then he handed it to me. I skimmed through the lines, and the words hit me like thunder. "I, Richard Whitman, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and testaments. I leave primary inheritance and full controlling interest of Whitman Holdings to my daughter, Clara Whitman. My wife, Elaine Prescott, shall receive a living stipend and residence rights at my discretion. Kim, should my death occur under suspicious or disputed circumstances, I request an independent investigation by an external authority." I stopped reading. The paper trembled in my hands. "He knew," I whispered. "He suspected." Goodman leaned forward. He didn't trust Elaine. Not anymore. He saw what she was doing. The isolation. The financial transfers. The manipulation. But he didn't want a confrontation while he was sick. He was scared. Goodman nodded slowly. And disappointed. I blinked back tears. He thought he had more time. Goodman continued. "We had plans to formalize this through the courts, but he kept delaying, hoping, I think, that Elaine would reveal herself." "She did," I said bitterly. "Too late." He sighed and opened a second file. "There's more." He handed me a USB drive and a small notepad with my father's handwriting. "Clara, if Goodman gives you this, it means I'm gone." "I'm sorry. There's evidence here. Documents. Audio. I've been collecting it for weeks. Maybe months. I don't even know anymore. But I need you to finish what I couldn't. I trust you. I always have, Dad." I stared at the handwriting. That signature. That final line. "I trust you." It was both a gift and a burden. "What now?" I asked. Goodman folded his hands. "Elaine already filed probate with her own legal team. They're operating under a separate will, likely one signed after this. One I never saw. And frankly, I question its validity. She replaced everything else. Why not the will?" He nodded grimly. "But now we have this, dated, witnessed, notarized, and corroborated by your father's instructions. You're not just a footnote. Clara, you're the heir." For a moment, the air left my lungs. Not because of the money, not the shares, but because, after weeks of being erased from the funeral, from the family, from the man who raised me, I finally had proof. He remembered me. He believed in me. He left the door unlocked for me alone. Goodman stood. "I'll file an injunction immediately." "This changes everything. But be warned." He paused at the doorway. "They won't go down without a fight." I tightened my grip on the USB drive. "Neither will I." That night, back in my hotel room, I plugged in the USB. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. I wasn't ready, not emotionally, not mentally. But this wasn't about being ready. This was about being brave. Dad had trusted me with his final truth, and I owed it to him to look it in the eye. The folder structure was meticulously organized: financial transfers, medication logs, photos, audio. It didn't feel like a hasty act of desperation. It felt planned, documented, prosecutable. I clicked on the first folder, financial transfers. PDF after PDF lined the screen: monthly statements, bank ledgers, annotated with my father's own handwriting. In red ink, he circled large sums transferred from his personal accounts to a Shellstone Holdings, LLC. Attached to one entry was a typed note. "Elaine claims this is for property acquisition. I never approved it. Shellstone registered in her brother's name. Offshore activity. Suspicious. I swallowed hard. Then I opened the medication logs. Dad had created a timeline, cross-referencing dates of dizziness, memory fog, and nausea with changes to his prescriptions. He listed specific pills names I didn't recognize and wrote which ones Elaine had picked up herself. The notes became increasingly frantic. New pills make me tired all the time. Ask Goodman to check drug interactions. Told Elaine I feel worse. She says I'm being dramatic. Found a second bottle in kitchen unmarked. Doctor said he never prescribed Tolverin. Said it's not FDA approved in this dose. Elaine insists I'm confused. Am I confused? The handwriting trembled in those final entries. But one thing was clear. He wasn't imagining it. He was being drugged. I moved to the photo folder. The first few were harmless receipts, labeled prescription bottles, documents I'd already seen. Then the images changed. Grainy but clear enough. Elaine meeting a man in a dark parking garage. Then again in a restaurant. Then entering our home when Dad was supposed to be out of town. The man, her ex-husband, the one she claimed had abandoned her and the children. In Dad's notes, he labeled the man J. James Winters. He wrote, Elaine swore they hadn't spoken in years. These photos say otherwise. Who's been in my home? What else has she lied about? The air in the room turned colder. My hands shook as I opened the audio folder. There were 8 recordings. One labeled, Office, May 3rd. I hit play. Elaine's voice came through. Muffled but recognizable. I don't care what his calendar says, cancel it. He doesn't even know what day it is anymore. Just tell him the board rescheduled. Another voice, Derek's. He's starting to ask questions about the condo in Vancouver. Elaine again. Then distract him. Get him on the blue pills. Those knock him out. By the time he wakes up, it's already done. Another file. Kitchen, May 9th. Elaine again. Whispering to someone, likely her brother. We're almost there. He's tired. Weak. He won't last the summer. Once it's over, the trust kicks in and we split everything. Derek gets the company shares. I keep the house. Silence. Then laughter. I paused the recording. Not because I couldn't take more, but because if I didn't stop, I'd throw the laptop across the room. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditation. Targeted abuse. Possibly murder. I opened the last file in the USB Dad's journal scans. Page after page of his handwriting tracking symptoms. Moments of clarity. Doubts. One sentence stood out. Scribbled and circled. I'm scared she's trying to kill me slowly. I read it again. And again. And suddenly, the funeral made more sense. The way the casket was closed so quickly. How I wasn't allowed near his hospital room. How no autopsy was performed. How Elaine refused to acknowledge me. Not out of grief, but fear. Because she didn't want me anywhere near the truth. And now I had it. I printed everything. Screenshots, ledger copies, photos. I duplicated the USB and encrypted it. I made 2 physical copies and placed one in the hotel safe and another at a friend's law firm. If something happened to me, this information would not die with me. And in the back of my mind, I kept hearing his voice. Finish what I couldn't. I would, even if it destroyed everything she'd built, even if it meant burning the house of lies she'd furnished in my father's name. I didn't sleep that night. Not from grief I had already buried what little space they left me to mourn, but from the sharp, icy pulse of adrenaline. That kind of hypervigilance you feel when you realize you're not safe anymore. At 3:43, I thought I heard the hotel door rattle. Just once. Soft. Barely audible. I got up. Heart pounding. Checked the lock. Still bolted. But when I looked through the peephole, the hallway light was flickering, and just before it stabilized, I swore I saw the shape of someone turning the corner, the outline of a man in a jacket far too familiar. I stayed awake till sunrise. The next morning, I headed to a nearby cafe, one I picked at random, 2 neighborhoods away from the hotel. I didn't bring my laptop. I just brought one USB copy, tucked into the inner lining of my coat. I needed space, clarity, a moment to breathe. But 20 minutes after I sat down, I noticed him. Same man. 2 tables away, navy windbreaker, earbuds in, not drinking anything, no phone in hand, just watching Or rather pretending not to. I got up, casually, walked to the counter to ask for a to-go cup. When I turned back, he was gone. No receipt on the table, no coffee. Just the echo of a chair moved hastily. That was the first time. It wouldn't be the last. When I returned to the hotel, the cleaning staff had already been through. Bed made. Towels replaced. No signs of anything wrong. Except, my laptop charger had been moved. I always left it coiled on the left side of the desk. Now it was on the right. And the zipper on my toiletries pouch was half open just enough to suggest someone curious. Not clumsy. Then I noticed it. The envelope. The original copy of my father's will. It was still in my bag, but no longer inside the hidden compartment where I left it. Instead, it was tucked neatly between two books exactly where someone might want me to find it. That wasn't a mistake. That was a message. We see you. I called Goodman from a payphone. Tear the hotel room apart, he said immediately. Don't trust the Wi-Fi. Don't leave anything there. And don't stay another night. Should I go to the police? He paused. Not yet. We need more than suspicion and paranoia. We need evidence. If they think you're close to blowing this open, they'll make mistakes. So you want me to bait them? No, he said. I want you to be careful, but visible. They don't want exposure. Use that. I hung up and checked out within the hour, burned the room behind me, checked into a new place under a different name, paid cash, told no one. That night, I received a message on WhatsApp, unknown number. It read, "Walk away. Your father's gone. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. No name. Just that." I stared at it, then typed a response. You should have let him live. I never hit send, because a second message popped up before I could. Careful. Clara, you're not the only one who knows how to disappear. I froze. No more replies came. Just 3 dots as if someone could be typing. Then they vanished. That night, I slept with the lights on. I put a chair under the doorknob, and I backed up every file to 2 separate drives, one hidden in a locked luggage case beneath the bed, and one I mailed to a journalist I trusted from college, just in case. Because now it wasn't just about clearing my father's name or reclaiming my place in his legacy. It was survival. Elaine had spent years constructing her empire of lies brick by brick, whisper by whisper. She had killed his memory, maybe even more than that. And if she thought I'd just crawl away quietly into the shadows, she didn't know me at all. It was ironic. Really. The first time I entered the Whitman Holdings boardroom wasn't as the founder's daughter, but as a threat. They didn't expect me. Elaine had made sure of that. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. I'm sorry, but this is a closed session. I know, I replied, but I believe the board will want to hear what I have to say. I handed her a sealed folder labeled, "To be distributed before vote." Inside, copies of my father's original will. The real one, signed, notarized, witnessed. She hesitated, then picked up the phone with trembling fingers. 10 minutes later, I walked into the boardroom. 12 seats, 10 men in suits, 1 woman sharp bob, sharper tongue their general counsel, and Elaine, flawless, as always. Diamond brooch, navy silk, calmly sipping sparkling water like she wasn't about to choke on it. Her eyes met mine, cold. Then calculating. Clara, she said smoothly, this is unexpected. Surprises tend to come with the truth, I replied, walking to the head of the table. I won't take much of your time. Chairman Langford, the oldest member of the board, cleared his throat. What is this about? I handed him a second copy of the will. The original last testament of Richard Whitman, I said, calmly, filed outside of Elaine's knowledge, dated 3 months before the supposed final version submitted to probate. Langford frowned as he flipped through the pages. Elaine leaned forward. This is absurd. That will is outdated. Richard updated everything through our legal team just weeks before his passing. Convenient, I said, and untrue. I turned to the general counsel. Do you have a record of that revision? Signed, notarized, witnessed. She hesitated. Elaine jumped in. It was handled privately. With whom? I asked. Silence. Langford set the folder down. Where did you get this? Clara. My father gave it to me personally, I replied. He also left a file of evidence with his former lawyer, including documents that suggest he was being medicated against his will and manipulated to surrender control of his assets. Elaine's lips twitched. Are you accusing me of elder abuse? I'm presenting facts. The accusations will come later. Gasps around the table. Whispers. Legal pads flipping open. Elaine stood. This is nothing but a grieving daughter lashing out. Clara was estranged from her father for years. Because you orchestrated it, I snapped. Because you isolated him, controlled access, cut him off from friends, and dictated his calendar. Do you have proof of these wild claims? I pulled out a flash drive, 8 recorded conversations, financial records, drug interactions traced by a physician, and photographs. I walked to the screen at the front of the room and inserted the drive. The first photo, Elaine and her ex-husband, James Winters, seated in a cafe holding hands. Next, same man entering our home while Dad was hospitalized. Murmurs. Someone muttered, Jesus. Then I played a 10-second audio clip. Elaine's voice. He won't last the summer. Once it's over, the trust kicks in. I paused it before the laughter. Elaine's face didn't break, but her hands clenched just slightly. I could go to the press, I said evenly, or the police. But I thought I'd offer you the chance to correct this before your shareholders find out Whitman Holdings is being run by a fraud. Langford tapped the table. We need an emergency legal review. General counsel nodded. And to halt any transfer of executive authority pending verification of these claims, Elaine turned to them. You can't possibly believe this. Langford cut her off. We can't possibly ignore it. She turned back to me. The smile was gone. Only the fury remained. You've made a powerful enemy. Clara. No, I said. You've made a terrible mistake. Outside, the air tasted like cold metal and electricity. I had cracked her mask, not shattered it, but cracked it just enough for the rot to show underneath. The board wouldn't trust her blindly anymore. Not after this. The war had begun, and now it wasn't just personal. It was public, and I was done hiding. It didn't take long. 2 days after the boardroom confrontation, I woke up to chaos. My name was on the news. Not in the way I wanted. Not as the whistleblower. Not as the daughter standing up for her father's legacy. But as the estranged heiress with a history of emotional instability, questionable motives, and a reputation for erratic behavior. The headline read, Heiress or Opportunist. Clara Whitman challenges, stepmother in shocking inheritance dispute. The article included anonymous sources, citing outbursts, emotional breakdowns, and even falsely a stay in a psychiatric facility after my mother's death. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. They published a photo of me at the funeral alone. At the back row, eyes red, witnesses describe her as disruptive and unwanted during the service. Another article quoted Elaine directly. Richard loved his daughter, but they had grown apart. Toward the end, he was concerned about her well-being. He didn't want her burdened with business decisions she wasn't emotionally equipped to handle. It was masterful, not angry, not slanderous, just concerned. Framed in the language of care, the sharpest knife Elaine had. I got a cease and desist letter that same afternoon. From Winters & Cole, her private legal team, a high-profile firm known for silencing whistleblowers and burying lawsuits beneath paperwork and court costs. The letter accused me of defamation, harassment, unauthorized use of confidential financial information, and digital trespassing for accessing Dad's files. They threatened to file a formal motion if I didn't retract all claims and return property unlawfully obtained. Goodman read the letter and scoffed. She's throwing everything at the wall, he said, hoping something sticks. Classic overreach. But it's working, I whispered. She's destroying me publicly. He nodded grimly. That's the point. Make you look unstable. If this goes to court, credibility is everything. That night, I received another anonymous message, this time an email. Subject, You're not who he thought you were. Inside, a PDF attachment of an old college disciplinary notice. A minor infraction, late dorm fees, and missed classes during the semester. My mom died. But Elaine's team had spun it. In the email, Someone posed as a concerned former classmate. Writing, she was always off. Moody, reclusive. You could tell something wasn't right. I just hope the board knows what they're dealing with. It made my skin crawl. They were rewriting my life, piece by piece, turning my grief into madness, my loyalty into obsession, my love into greed. Goodman offered to go on record to defend me. So did a few of Dad's old business partners. But no one from inside the family. Derek stayed silent. The rest of the board, politely distant. No one wanted to be caught in the crossfire. Even the journalist I'd sent the USB 2 weeks ago went dark. I called twice. Voicemail. On the third attempt, I got a single text. Legal pressure. Can't risk it. Sorry. Elaine had money, power, and now momentum. The court hearing was approaching, and with every hit piece, my chances seemed to shrink. The only thing I had left, proof, and something more dangerous than any PR strategy, truth, with a voice. So I made a choice. I recorded my own story, not just statements, but everything. My memories with Dad, the moment he gave me the will, the voice memos, the photos, the smear campaign, and how power silences the very people it hurts most. I uploaded it anonymously to an encrypted platform, sent it to 3 independent investigative outlets, and waited. The video went viral in 48 hours, not on mainstream news, but through whispers, Reddit threads, Substack newsletters, Twitter reposts. The daughter they tried to erase. The real will of Richard Whitman. She has the tapes. Public sentiment started to shift. The board called for a second emergency session. And Elaine, she looked at me now, not like a nuisance, but like a threat. Elaine requested the meeting. That was the first red flag. No PR team, no lawyers, just her. She sent it through Goodman's office, a short, formal note that read, "Clara, let's speak. No intermediaries. Just you and me. You owe me that much." I don't know if it was curiosity or arrogance, but I said yes. We met at my father's private study, the one on the second floor of the estate. The one that smelled like cedar and thyme. The one she had tried to lock me out of years ago. I arrived first. Waited. When she entered, she didn't smile. She didn't attack. She just walked in like it was still hers. And maybe in her mind, it was. We sat across from each other at my father's writing desk. No pretense. Just silence. Then, "You look more like your mother every day," she said. I didn't respond. She took off her gloves, finger by finger. "I knew this would happen one day," she murmured. "Not exactly like this, but close." I folded my hands. "Then why go through with it?" Her eyes narrowed. "Because I earned it." "Earned what?" She tilted her head. "The house, the money, the company, the life. Your father may have loved you, Clara, but he needed me. I made sure he had clean clothes, meals, medication, order. I took care of the things he didn't want to face, including you." "That's not love," I said coldly. "No," she agreed. "It's survival." She leaned forward. "You think this is about a will? A few zeros. No. This is about who gets to write the story now that he's gone. And you wanted to erase mine." "I wanted to protect mine." She paused, studying me. "You were always the fragile one. Artistic, sensitive. You couldn't even handle the funeral. You banned me from it. You made a scene. You stole his body." We stared at each other across the desk, the air thick with things unsaid, years of them. Then she changed the tone. Her voice lowered. "You have one chance, Clara." "To do what?" "Walk away. Publicly. Withdraw the court motion. Let the board settle things quietly. I'll authorize a trust in your name. Enough for comfort, for dignity, a bribe, a compromise. One that saves your name from being dragged through the courts any further." I laughed, not from humor, but exhaustion. "You still don't get it. Enlighten me." I reached into my coat and laid the flash drive on the desk. "The world already knows." She didn't flinch, didn't even glance at it. "Instead," she whispered, "you think the truth matters in rooms like this." "I know it does." She stared at me for a long time. Then she stood, and for the first time, I saw it, not fear, not rage, resentment, bitter, old. rooted in something even deeper than power. "You were born lucky," she said. "I had to claw my way in. Everything I took because no one ever gave me anything. And now you'll lose it the same way." She walked to the door, then turned one last time. "You think you've won, but trust me, Clara." Her voice dropped. "You're not the only one with secrets." Then she was gone. I sat there alone, in my father's chair. The leather still held his shape. The smell of his cologne still lingered faintly in the room. I closed my eyes. And for the first time since his death, I wasn't afraid. Because now, the game wasn't in the dark anymore. It was out in the open. And I knew how to play. The courthouse didn't look like a battlefield, but that's exactly what it was. Tall windows, marble floors, clean air that smelled faintly of old wood and bureaucracy. It all felt too civil for what we were about to do. Because when you're up against someone like Elaine, court isn't about justice. It's about survival. I sat beside Goodman at the long, polished bench. He adjusted his glasses, leaned in. "Today is just the beginning. Probate verification. Chain of custody. If the judge sees inconsistencies in her version of the will, we push for formal contestation. And if she's covered her tracks." He smiled faintly. "She hasn't. Not completely." I glanced across the aisle. Elaine sat like royalty, flawless hair, dark navy suit, pearl earrings. Her lead attorney, Charles Minton, was a corporate shark dressed in silk and strategy. He nodded to Goodman like they were old colleagues. They probably were. The judge entered Honorable Susan Mallory. She didn't look amused. "Let's get to it," she said sharply. "Miss Whitman, you claim that the document submitted by Mrs. Elaine Whitman is not the final will of your late father, Richard Whitman." "I do, Your Honor." "And that you possess a more recent version." "Yes." Goodman stood. "Your Honor, we have the original document signed and witnessed 3 months prior to the version presented to probate. We also have digital metadata confirming the creation date and notarization." He handed it over. The judge skimmed the contents, then turned to Elaine's counsel. "Mr. Minton." He stood with practiced ease. "We argue that the will my client submitted is valid and represents Mr. Whitman's final intent. The document presented by Miss Clara Whitman lacks chain of custody clarity and may have been produced under duress." I snapped. "He gave it to me himself, in his office, with his signature still fresh." "Miss Whitman," the judge interrupted. "Please let your attorney speak for you." I bit my tongue. Minton continued smoothly. "We request that the court disregard the secondary will until further forensic authentication can be completed. Furthermore, we believe Miss Whitman's recent behavior, including public accusations and media manipulation, cast doubt on her motives." Goodman didn't flinch. "Your Honor, opposing counsel is using PR strategy, not legal logic. This isn't about public image. This is about who Richard Whitman trusted when he still had clarity of mind and who isolated him during his decline." Mallory narrowed her eyes. "Is there evidence of coercion?" Goodman nodded. "We'll submit the medical timeline, voice recordings, and photos that suggest manipulation and suppression of autonomy." Minton cut in, raising his voice slightly. "We question the legality of those recordings. Were they obtained with consent? By Mr. Whitman himself?" Goodman shot back. "He recorded them on his own devices, his own protection, his own voice." There was a pause. Then the judge spoke. "I'm granting temporary stay on the current distribution of assets until this matter is fully examined. Both versions of the will shall be reviewed by an independent probate investigator." Elaine flinched. Not much. Just enough for me to know she didn't expect that. As we exited the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Flashes, questions, microphones. Elaine walked calmly through the chaos, whispering something to her lawyer. I stopped, turned toward the cameras, and for the first time, I spoke. My father wasn't confused. He wasn't senile. He wasn't weak. He was betrayed by someone he trusted. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for the truth." And then I walked away. My knees were shaking, but my voice steady, because I knew once truth enters a courtroom, it becomes harder to bury and harder to survive. Court resumed with a colder air. The judge sat tall behind the bench, her expression unreadable, not uninterested, just guarded. Goodman stood and addressed the court. Your Honor, we'd like to call our first witness, Dr. James Holloway. A soft murmur ran through the room. Dr. Holloway was my father's longtime physician, the one Elaine had quietly replaced during Dad's final months. I hadn't heard from him in years. Until last week, when he messaged me, I was pushed out. I want to testify. He stepped into the witness box. A tall man in his 60s, calm, deliberate. Goodman began. Doctor, during your years attending Mr. Whitman, did you ever observe cognitive decline? Not until the final weeks, he replied. Even then, it was mild. He was lucid, sharp. He asked pointed questions about medication and care. He was concerned. Concerned about what? Isolation and manipulation. He specifically mentioned his wife's growing control, limiting his visitors, altering dosages. I glanced at Elaine. She stared straight ahead, emotionless. Were you aware of any changes in medication that you didn't authorize? Yes. I reviewed his chart after I was dismissed. New sedatives were prescribed ones I had previously advised against due to their suppressive cognitive effects. Did you speak to Mr. Whitman about it? I tried, but I was denied access after March 9th. Goodman paused. Did he say anything to you that stood out? Doctor. Holloway nodded. One night before I left, he said, if something happens, talk to Clara. She knows where I keep the real paper. Shoo! There was silence. The judge looked up. Elaine whispered something to her lawyer, but the energy had shifted. It wasn't proof yet, but it was weight. The kind that tilts a courtroom, slowly, firmly. Then came the surprise. Goodman stood again. Your Honor, we request to present a secondary witness, unexpected but relevant. A woman walked in, petite, late 40s, nervous hands. The courtroom leaned forward. State your name for the court, Goodman said gently. Margaret Fields. My heart stopped. Dad's old housekeeper. I hadn't seen her in years. Elaine had fired her months before Dad's death. What was your role in the Whitman household? I managed housekeeping and Mr. Whitman's medications for 6 years. Why were you let go? She hesitated. Elaine said I was too sentimental. But I had started to question things. The pills. The phone calls blocked. How visitors were turned away. Did Mr. Whitman confide in you? Tears welled in her eyes. He said, they want me gone, Maggie. But I wrote it all down. I gave it to Clara. It was a blow. A human one. Truth wrapped in love. Not law. The kind jurors remember. Then Elaine made her move. Minton stood. We call our own witness. Dr. Armand Telford, neurologist. A sharply dressed man entered, slick hair, expensive watch. I didn't recognize him. Elaine watched me as he took the stand. She was smirking. Just slightly. Dr. Telford, you conducted evaluations of Mr. Whitman. Yes, I was brought in privately for mental assessment. Findings. Significant signs of early dementia, impaired judgment, inconsistent memory patterns. Date of diagnosis, June 12th. My blood froze. That was 2 days after Dad gave me the will. Goodman stood for cross-examination. You say Mr. Whitman had dementia. Who hired you? Mrs. Whitman. Were any family members consulted? No. Did you ever speak to Clara Whitman? No. Did you conduct cognitive testing independently? Yes. Do you have audio or written transcripts? No. Notes were taken and submitted privately. Goodman stepped closer. Doctor, did you see the medications Mr. Whitman was on at the time? No. Do you know if they could mimic dementia symptoms? He paused. I'm not a pharmacologist. Exactly. Goodman snapped. So your diagnosis, based solely on a visit arranged by the beneficiary of his estate, without full context, without medical history, is not only biased, it's dangerous. Minton objected. Sustained. The judge said. But the damage was done, Doctor. Telford looked rattled. The jury looked divided. And Elaine, she was still no panic, no retreat, just cold strategy. As the session closed, the judge called for a short recess. I left the courtroom and sat on the stone bench outside. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from clarity. They were running out of lies. But I wasn't out of truth. Not yet. The final day of testimony had the feel of a storm about to break. Outside, the sky was steel gray. Inside, the courtroom was packed tighter than ever. Journalists, onlookers, board members, even my brother Derek finally. He didn't look at me, but he was here. That meant something. The judge entered, and we rose. She wasted no time. Mr. Minton, you may call your final witness. Elaine's attorney stood confidently. We call Mr. James Winters. My stomach dropped. Her ex-husband, the man in the cafe photos, the one sneaking into our house when Dad was hospitalized. He walked in calm, polished, perfectly rehearsed. Elaine watched me the whole time. Her eyes said, "Checkmate." Winters took the stand. Mr. Winters, how would you describe your relationship with Mrs. Whitman during her marriage to Richard Whitman? We remained friends. Nothing romantic during that period. A lie. But you were present in the Whitman home near the time of Mr. Whitman's passing. Yes, at her request. She needed help organizing estate documents. It was all very formal. He smiled. Practiced. Did you ever witness signs of manipulation or misconduct? Never. Elaine was devoted to Richard. She protected him. He even sounded believable. Until Goodman stood up, and everything changed. Mr. Winters, are you aware that your presence in the house was caught on a security camera? Pause. I was helping Elaine with estate filing. Goodman handed the bailiff a small screen. Let's play the footage. The screen lit up. Low resolution, night vision grainy. But clear enough. James Winters entering through the back door of the Whitman estate. No folders, no files. Just 2 glasses of wine and an overnight bag. The timestamp, 1 day after Dad fell into a medically induced coma. Minton stood. Objection irrelevant. Sustained, said the judge. Unless counsel can tie this to the will. Goodman nodded. He pulled out another envelope. This is a notarized statement from the night nurse on duty the same night as this footage. He read aloud. At 2, Cecilia M. I heard Mrs. Whitman and a man arguing. She said, if you mess this up, the trust dissolves, and I get nothing. Gasps. The courtroom rippled with energy. Even Derek looked up now. Elaine's face cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but it was enough. Goodman walked forward. Mr. Winters, do you deny that this is your voice? The video played again, now with audio enhancement. Elaine's voice. Unmistakable. Don't forget the new signature page. I'll burn the old one after. Winters turned pale. I was just helping organize. You helped commit fraud. Mr. Winters. Objection. Overruled. Then came the final blow. Goodman presented the original file metadata from Dad's digital vault. Authenticated. Timestamped. Cross-referenced with cloud backups. The original will unaltered, untouched, and signed 3 weeks later than the one Elaine submitted. Judge Mallory leaned back, eyes closed for a moment. Then she spoke. This court finds sufficient grounds to question the legitimacy of the submitted will. An injunction is now issued against further control of the estate by Mrs. Elaine Whitman. She turned to Elaine. And you are now under investigation for potential fraud, undue influence, and will tampering. Elaine didn't cry, didn't scream. She just stood, stiffly, and walked out of the courtroom. No glance backward. Not to me, not to Derek, not even to Winters, who sat frozen on the stand, like a puppet with its strings cut. Afterward, I stood in the hallway. The air felt lighter, thinner, real. Derek approached. He didn't say sorry, didn't hug me. He just said, she fooled all of us, then walked away. It was enough. Later that night, I stood alone in Dad's study, the one she tried to claim, and for the first time, it belonged to me not because of a signature, not because of a verdict, but because the silence no longer hurt. 3 days after the court ruling, I received an email. No subject, no sender, just one line in the body. Your father had more than one vault. Look deeper. Attached. A single PDF. It was a scanned document. a wire transfer receipt. Amount: $750. Cellulone. Origin: Whitman Holdings Trust B. Destination: Merrick Bank, Cayman Islands. Recipient: Elaine Whitman and cosigner, Derek Whitman. Date: 6 weeks before Dad's death. My throat tightened. I stared at the screen like it might change if I blinked enough. But the names were there. Clear. Bold. Undeniable. Elaine had hidden money. But Derek, why was he on it? I called Goodman immediately. He scanned the document in silence, then said, "This wasn't in any estate filing. It's off ledger, hidden. Is it real?" He nodded slowly. "Looks like it. Whoever sent this has access to internal banking clearance. This isn't something a journalist could fake," I whispered. Then Derek lied. He looked at me carefully. Or Elaine used his name. Which one is worse? I drove to Derek's place that night. He opened the door shirtless, beer in hand, pretending he hadn't seen the news. His eyes gave it away. "You knew," I said. "Knew what?" I held up my phone. Let him see the transfer. He paled. For the first time, actually paled. Then said, "That was supposed to be a loan. For me. For my business. From Dad." He hesitated. "No, from Elaine. She said Dad wanted to set up a fund for us. Said it was a quiet move. Family trust stuff. Why would you co-sign with her to move money offshore?" He didn't answer. Just drank. "You were in on it. Clara. You let her isolate him. You let her change the meds. You signed papers." He snapped back. "I didn't know she'd do this." "You didn't care," I shot back. He looked away. "I needed the money. I was drowning." She offered a way out. I whispered, "She bought you." His silence confirmed it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of Elaine, but because of Derek. The betrayal from someone I once shared a sandbox with hurt more than anything she ever did. I opened Dad's laptop again. Dug through archived folders, the ones that were too messy for Elaine to bother scrubbing. In one labeled Polaris Private, I found a video, dated 1 month before his stroke. I played it. Dad was sitting in his study, camera propped against the lamp. He looked tired, gaunt, but clear. His voice cracked slightly. "If you're watching this, something happened. I've been feeling off. Elaine keeps adjusting my meds. Derek won't look me in the eye. I gave Clara the real will. I also gave her something else. A list. With every account. Every movement. If she finds it, she'll know what Elaine did." He paused. Looked straight into the lens. "Don't trust the smooth ones. Truth is never smooth. It's sharp. It cuts. But it also cleans." Then the screen went black. I searched the office until sunrise, and behind a drawer panel, taped between 2 false boards, I found a single folded sheet. Labeled, "Polaris, sequence order." It was a key. A map of money trails. Everything Elaine never expected me to find. And more chilling, it had names, dates, transfers, and at the bottom, a single scribbled note. "If anything happens, follow the last name." One last name was circled. Not Elaine, not Derek, but Margot. I froze. My mother's sister, dead for 10 years. Or so I thought. Margot, my aunt, my mother's only sister. Gone for 10 years. Or so we were told. I remembered the funeral closed casket, rushed service. No photos. I was in college, grieving Mom's recent passing. Margot had supposedly died of an overdose in a different state. No one had really talked about it after, until now. The file Dad left the Polaris document included a hidden location in a decrypted note. "Trust no one. If Clara finds this, go to the address. 1142 Bellwater Lane." It was in upstate Vermont. A day's drive. I didn't tell Goodman. I didn't tell Derek. I just left. I needed answers no court could provide. Bellwater Lane wasn't a road. It was a dirt path swallowed by pine and thyme. At the end stood a modest cabin, wood panels weathered gray, chimney quietly puffing. Someone lived here. My hands trembled as I knocked. Seconds passed. Then the door creaked open, and there she was. Margot, older, thinner, her once auburn hair now silver, tied back in a low braid. Her eyes, identical to Mom's, widened when she saw me. And then she whispered, "Clara." I nodded. She pulled me inside without another word. For an hour, I just sat, listening, processing, not interrupting, because her story changed everything. She hadn't died. She'd vanished on purpose. Margot had been in a long battle with substance abuse, spiraling after my mother's death. Dad had tried to help, but Elaine, already married to him by then, wanted Margot gone. A liability, she called her. One night, a deal was made. Elaine offered Margot 200,000 to disappear, to sign a medical report labeling her as terminal. In exchange, her debts would be paid, and she'd be free but dead to us. Margot took it, because she didn't think we'd care, and because Dad agreed. He thought it would be best for his image, for the company, for us. But later, he regretted it bitterly. He started sending Margot small notes, money, even gifts under aliases. Elaine never knew, until she found one of the bank records. Then came the threats. If Margot came back, she'd go public with every scandal in Margot's past. She'd frame her for fraud, even drug trafficking. So Margot stayed silent, until now. Why did he write your name in that final note? I asked. She sighed. Because I knew about the Cayman accounts. I helped him build the backups when he started fearing Elaine. He didn't trust the lawyers, but he trusted me. Even after everything, she pulled a metal box from under the floorboards. Inside, flash drives, a journal, copies of emails between Elaine and an offshore broker, and a single photograph. Dad, and me, and Margot in a hospital, smiling weakly. It was dated 2 months before his stroke. He was going to come clean, she said. He was going to tell you everything. Why didn't you? She hesitated. Because I thought maybe you didn't need more ghosts. I smiled faintly. I needed every ghost, just not the ones she made up. We sat in silence. Then she said, I'll testify. If this isn't over, and you need me, I'll speak. I placed my hand over hers. No more silence. She nodded. Then let's finish this. The drive back from Vermont was quiet. Margot dozed off in the passenger seat, her silver braid resting against the window. The flash drives and journal were zipped in my backpack, secured like treasure. I should have felt triumphant, but something gnawed at me. The kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the eye of a storm. We arrived at my apartment just after sunset. I locked the door behind us, double-checked the windows, and pulled out Dad's drives. My plan was simple. Meet with Goodman in the morning, submit everything to the court, and call the press right after. End it all? Margot sat with tea, staring out the window. He loved you, she said softly. I know, I replied, but he let too much happen. He tried to fix it in the end. Too late. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. That night, around 2:30 am, someone knocked on the door. 3 soft knocks. I checked the peephole. Derek. I hesitated, then opened it. He looked rough, pale, sweating, like he hadn't slept in days. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded slowly, stepping aside. He entered, eyes darting to Margot in the kitchen. His jaw clenched. I thought she was dead. She almost was, I said. Thanks to your new stepmom. He didn't smile. I came to say sorry. He began. And to warn you. My eyes narrowed. Warn me. He looked down. I didn't know what Elaine was planning when I co-signed that transfer. I thought it was shady, but I didn't realize she'd rewrite the will. Isolate Dad. She said it was about protecting the family. You believed her? He exhaled sharply. I needed to. I crossed my arms. What now? Another excuse. He shook his head. She's panicking. She knows Margot's alive. She's desperate. She's trying to get to the drives. You need to. I froze. My laptop light blinked. It was open. I turned slowly. The flash drives were gone. Margot stood in the hallway, frozen, her hand covering her mouth. The backpack was half zipped. The drives were gone, and so was Derek. I ran to the hallway. The elevator had just closed. I took the stairs 2 at a time, heart thundering. By the time I reached the lobby, his car was pulling out into traffic. Gone. He had played me, again. And this time, with everything on the line, back upstairs, Margot sat on the couch, trembling. I didn't even hear him take them. She whispered. Why would he do this now? I knew why. Because on one of those drives wasn't just evidence against Elaine. It was evidence against Derek. Bank records, fraud, phone logs, even a private message to Elaine about how Clara would be easier to control once the will was out of the way. He wasn't just a pawn. He was a partner. The next 24 hours were chaos. Goodman filed for an emergency injunction. We alerted the authorities, but without the physical drives, the case weakened. The judge needed originals, not claims. But then came the twist. Margot had backed up one of the drives. A week ago, encrypted. Stored on a private cloud only she knew about. We recovered it just in time. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to reopen the fraud charges. Enough to request an arrest warrant for Derek. And enough to subpoena Elaine again. On the morning we submitted the files, Goodman turned to me and said, "This doesn't guarantee justice, but it guarantees exposure." I nodded. Then that's where justice begins. Later that week, Derek was picked up trying to board a flight to Aruba. Elaine's assets were frozen. The estate was placed under court conservatorship, and Margot, the ghost we all thought was gone, became the key witness in the biggest family fraud case the city had seen in a decade. In the end, it wasn't just about money. It was about memory, legacy, the difference between a life erased and a life remembered. And me, I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because I never stopped looking even when everyone else closed their eyes. The house was quiet again, but not empty. Elaine was gone. Derek was indicted. The estate had been split according to Dad's real will, the one he gave me, the one he trusted me to protect. But I didn't take it all. I kept enough to cover the legal costs, the damages, the debts he never got to fix while Elaine controlled the strings. The rest, I gave it away. To the foundation he started for underprivileged students, to the veterans program he once anonymously supported, and to the art school my mother always dreamed of attending but never could. People thought I was crazy. You fought so hard just to give it all away. But I wasn't giving it away. I was giving it back to the version of my father who never stopped trying, even when his choices were broken. Margot moved in with a friend in Connecticut. She's still rebuilding. Sometimes she sends me little notes, sketches of my mother's face, or old photos I never knew she kept. She's healing, quietly, on her own terms. Goodman called last week. Elaine took a plea. No jail, but full restitution. Her name's burned in every boardroom she once stepped foot in. She got off easy. I said, she got off empty. That was enough for me. One day, I returned to Dad's study, the one that was once filled with secrets. I opened the drawer where he used to keep his favorite pens, the ones he bought in Tokyo on a business trip he never stopped talking about. There was one last envelope, addressed to me, in his handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a single page. Clara, if you're reading this, I hope you never had to, but if you did, it means I failed to protect you from the people I let in too close. I wasn't a perfect man. I let love blind me. I let comfort steal my courage. But you were always the sharpest mirror I had. You made me see what I'd stopped looking for. Don't fight for my name. Don't waste your years undoing mine. Fight for your own story. Make it cleaner. Make it louder. Make it free. Dad. I sat there for a long time, not crying, just breathing, letting go. Later that year, I started a podcast, The First Will, a space where people could anonymously share stories of family betrayal, hidden truths, and the quiet ways people fight back. It grew faster than I expected. People reached out, thousands. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a witness, a keeper of voices that almost disappeared. On what would have been Dad's 70th birthday, I stood in the garden he loved, alone, but not lonely. I planted a tree, a simple maple, just like the one he used to sit under as a boy in Ohio. I whispered into the wind. It's done now, Dad. The house is quiet, but it finally belongs to peace. Sometimes, revenge isn't rage. Sometimes, it's truth, silently delivered, unshakably real. Each episode is a slow burn of suspicion, sorrow, and strength. And when justice finally comes, It doesn't knock, it shatters. Are you ready to listen to the next voices that were silenced? Subscribe now to step into tales where the wounds are real, the pain is raw, and the revenge is unforgettable.